Give me Greenland or I'll hit you where it hurts. Donald Trump's threat to the UK and allies. Cabinet Minister Lisa Nandy is here. And we were expecting Nigel Farage to join us this week, but Reform tells us he's under the weather. So the Deputy Leader of Reform, RIchard Tice, set his alarm early at the last minute. And we'll hear exclusively from Trump's third in command in the US, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And our team at the desk for the next hour this week, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Jeremy Hunt, Labour Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, and News Queen, Kay Burley. Morning. Let's take a look at the dramatic news this morning. Trump's tariff threat splashes the Sunday Telegraph and the Sunday Times. A defiant president is on the front of the Telegraph, and the Prime Minister's anger has been expressed to the Sunday Times. The Observer, in its view, brands Donald Trump's move as blackmail. On another story, the Mail on Sunday says it's got hold of Robert Jenrick's secret defection plan, where his staffer said he should describe himself as the new sheriff in town. And the Sunday Mirror has a royal story. It says that Prince Harry will not be meeting his father when he comes to the UK this week. So a range of stories on the front page, but really only one big story in town. Jeremy Hunt is a former Foreign Secretary, former Chancellor. When you look at what Donald Trump is threatening to the rest of the allies, what on earth do you think is going on?
Well, sadly, this is what happens. This is what happens when Donald Trump thinks you are weak. And it is an outrageous way to treat a NATO ally. But he's doing it because he thinks Europe can't defend itself, that we need him for the defence of Ukraine. And if we want to stop this, if we want control of our own destiny, the only way to do it is to make sure we can actually defend ourselves. And we've said we're going to do that, but we haven't yet delivered. But that, in the end, is the only solution to show him that we are not the weak group of countries in Europe that he believes we are.
And if people are waking up this morning thinking, what on earth are we on about? Donald Trump yesterday went to his own social media platform, Truth Social, and suggested that the UK and other allies that sent a small number of military personnel to Greenland this week as part of a NATO mission had made a dangerous move. They were playing a dangerous game. And he threatened enormous tariffs on the economy unless he gets hold of Greenland. Tracy, for you, how on earth should the government handle this?
Well, it's pretty astonishing, isn't it? I mean, we all know that Trump is a thin-skinned, misogynistic, narcissistic bully. But I do think that the way that Keir Starmer has come out punching is to be welcomed. And the way that he has navigated these tariffs in the past, I think, have been terrific in that, for example, Jaguar Land Rover saved thousands of jobs. As mayor, I go on trade missions to the US. We've been able to navigate those tariffs and support businesses, not just in the UK, but the US. But this is quite wild.
And here we are with this threat being made to the UK as well as others. So the relationship is not delivering this weekend.
Well, as I say, it's great that Keir has said in a very robust way we're going to be handling this, and working with other European allies is really important to come together. But we should be allowed to protect our own interests in Greenland. And what I don't understand, he's obviously been looking at the shopping channels because you can't buy islands. And what he could do is he could just expand his footprint. They're already there. They could double, triple, quadruple the size of their footprint.
Kay, this is very tricky for the government politically, isn't it? I mean, no British Prime Minister can fall out with an American president unless they are really, really looking to make trouble.
I think he's gone as far as he has before, Starmer. He's gone as far as saying that Trump is completely wrong.
Yep.
And Trump is completely wrong. I heard an acronym that Jeremy told me about only this morning, TACO, Trump always chickens out. And I'm guessing that that's what Starmer is hoping. But there has to be a line in the sand, and I think this is it for Europe.
But Jeremy, what though could the government do straight away? So you say, yes, sure, more defence spending is the answer in the longer term. But right now, this feels like quite a sort of diplomatic emergency. What would you do if you were in their shoes?
Well, you have to make a calculation. And in this case, I think that Donald Trump will not actually follow through. I think there is a chance of Kay's TACO acronym happening, because if it did, to invade the sovereign territory of a NATO ally would mean the end of NATO. And that would actually make America weaker, because America's strength, a lot of it comes from the fact that it leads the most successful military alliance in history. It would dissolve that alliance overnight. So Trump has to believe that Europe would follow through on that. I think if we maintain our resolve, we can get through this, but it's going to be squeaky bum time.
Well, it's interesting. Later we'll hear from Mike Johnson, who's third in command in the United States. We spoke to him on Friday, so before this latest development, but we talked to him about what Trump's real plans are in Greenland. So you might be wondering this morning, with all this going on, what use is the Prime Minister's supposed closeness with Donald Trump if the UK and its allies' actions to try and protect Greenland end up being punished? Well, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, went to the Arctic, there she is in northern Norway, earlier this week, to emphasise the government's commitment to security in that vital region where Russia, China and democratic West are vying for control. But the UK and 7 other NATO countries sent a small number of military personnel to Greenland last week. They might have thought that would please the president, but as we've been discussing, he described it yesterday as a dangerous move and has threatened to retaliate with taxes on business that could cost the economy billions. So let's talk to the Cabinet Minister, Lisa Nandy, who's here with us this morning. Has the Prime Minister spoken to President Trump about this yet?
He made his views clear last night, as you'll have seen, and we will be obviously pursuing this with the US administration. The Prime Minister has spoken to the President several times in recent weeks, but as far as I'm aware, not since this latest announcement broke. But we've made clear our position that the future of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark. That is non-negotiable. That is our view, and it is one that is shared by many of our European allies.
Let's just look again, though, at what the President said. I mean, he made a threat to the UK and its allies to put billions of pounds of tariffs, basically extra taxes on business. He said these countries are playing a dangerous game and the tariff would be due until the complete and total purchase of Greenland. You've said you're not going to change a position on Greenland, so you must think he's going to back down.
Well, our relationship with the United States has always been one where we've at times differed, but we've worked very closely together, and nowhere more so than in relation to security. And that has been the case under this president as well. And as you were just discussing on the panel, there have been a number of times where we've had disagreements with the US administration, but where we've been able to have a sensible dialogue with them. And particularly, as Jeremy Hunt just said, you know, many of these issues, working together is in the US's interest, not just the UK's
but is
interest.
this a sensible dialogue? Threatening allies?
I think you have to look at the results that we've got from the relationship we've been able to forge with the United States and with our European counterparts over the last 18 months.
But the result
we've got a Prime Minister who is one of the only people in the world who can pick up the phone and help to make sure that we get to a place that we've got to in Ukraine. He's one of the only people who was able to negotiate a rate of tariff that, as Tracy just said, saved thousands of jobs here in the UK.
But he hasn't picked up
It's in our interest to talk, is I suppose the point that I'm making.
And he hasn't picked up the phone yet. And here we are with that ally which the Prime Minister has, for, as you've just explained, lavished effort and political attention on in order to get a good relationship. But here you are with a huge threat to our economy, an accusation that the UK and allies are playing a dangerous game.
Well, the President is very concerned about the Arctic situation and the threat that Russia poses, as is our government, as are many other governments as well. And you've just shown images of the Foreign Secretary. I spoke to her last night. She's just got back from North Norway, where we haven't just been making a statement about the importance of that region to our security and to American security, but we've actually been able to double the number of Marines that we'll have in the region over the next 3 years. We're working on a new fleet with our Norwegian counterparts. And the conversation with the Americans is very much about how we can collectively work together in order to secure our collective safety and interest. Now, in that context, this conversation about tariffs, we believe is wrong. We believe it's deeply unhelpful, and we believe it's counterproductive. And the Prime Minister has not shied away from making that clear.
But the problem is, you say you've been trying to work together. You say it's important that the Foreign Secretary went and NATO sent a small deployment of military personnel to look at how people could work together. But President Trump appears to have taken that as a threat. So has he got the wrong end of the stick Or maybe you've got the wrong end of the stick?
I don't think so. We talk to the US administration regularly, as you would imagine. We have a very close relationship with them, particularly on security, and we've been talking to them recently. But I would also say that often with this particular US administration, the president will express a very strong view. He will then encourage a dialogue. He welcomes difference of opinion, and we will never shy away from standing up for what we believe is right or asserting British interests. And what often happens is a negotiation, as I just alluded to. We saw that with the tariffs. We've also seen it in other areas where, for example, on film tariffs, the president announced that he was going to impose film tariffs. There was a conversation. It was clear that that would not be in British interests, but also not in US interests as well.
So
and
you
so
don't
that's a
believe
conversation that we've been able to continue to have.
So you think he'll chicken out?
Well, I don't think he'll chicken out. I think this is actually a really serious issue, and I think it deserves a far more adult debate than us threatening the United States and the United States threatening us, which is what a lot of the broadcasters have been urging us to do. We have a good dialogue with them. We have a strong working relationship. We have clear differences of opinion, nowhere less so than on the issue of the future of Greenland. But that is something that we're able to talk about and resolve in our collective interest.
And will the Prime Minister talk to Donald Trump about this at Davos this week?
Well, I know that the Prime Minister is planning to discuss this with President Trump at the earliest opportunity. If that's at Davos, then perhaps that will take place at Davos, but I couldn't tell you precisely when. I do know, though, that when it comes to issues around tariffs and the economy, that is the number one concern of the Prime Minister, the cost of living crisis that people are dealing with up and down this country. And as we saw with the previous discussion about tariffs, he was criticised for going to the United States. He was criticised for spending time outside of the country. But what was he able to do as a consequence of that adult conversation and that relationship that we're forging with countries around the world? He was able to come back and make sure that we safeguarded British jobs.
And let's be clear, too, about what these kinds of levels of tariffs might actually mean. I mean, how damaging do you think a tariff of 25%, which he's threatening, would actually be for our economy? Because business groups tell us it would be billions and billions of pounds.
Well, tariffs are a bad thing for the British economy. There's no shying away from that. It's why we will work extremely hard to make sure that Britain is protected from that. But tariffs are also a bad thing for the American consumer. Often the costs of those get passed on to consumers themselves. And so, just as Jeremy Hunt was saying in the conversation earlier, there are so many areas where it is in our collective interest to work together, whether it's security or the economy. And that's a case that we've made previously to the United States. It's an argument that we've won. It's a case we'll continue to make.
But what are we actually prepared to do? What are you as a government prepared to do if Donald Trump is, as he appears to be, completely intent on taking Greenland one way or another? Would you retaliate with tariffs?
Well, we're working really hard to make sure that we're not in that situation. I appreciate that it would be tempting to come on here and give you a range of things that the government will do. But actually, the one thing that we won't do is compromise on our position, which is that the future of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark. That is non-negotiable. That is the starting point for the conversation. What happens next is a result of the conversations that we're going to be able to have.
But you would not negotiate on that. You will never allow Donald Trump to take Greenland if you can possibly help it.
Well, we would never allow any changes to be made to the future of Greenland without the consent of the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's their country. They have a right to decide how the future of their own country, and we'll work with them to support them on that. We're not alone in that, but it's right that we're absolutely crystal clear about it.
We are talking to RIchard Tice from Reform in a moment, and Labour has been increasingly railing against Reform, even branding some of their plans racist. But you've been trailing them in the polls pretty much for a year now. It's not getting you anywhere. Why not?
Well, I completely understand why people would want to protest. We've had the biggest collapse in living standards under the last government since Victorian times, and we've been working really hard to turn that around, but there is no magic solution. Waiting times are coming down on the NHS. We're really pleased about that. It's because of the investment that we've put in, but people are still waiting. And so in every area of the economy, we know that there's more to do and people are frustrated. But I would just say that I think this week has been quite a turning point for reform, because by welcoming Robert Jenrick with open arms into their party, they've shown crystal clear what reform actually is. It's become a vehicle for failed Tories from the previous administration.
And it already had many Conservative defectors in its ranks, and they have continued to be absolutely hammering you in the polls for a long time. And many people might wonder, well, what's your real answer? There's lots of anti-reform rhetoric, but what's your real answer? I mean, this weekend, you're announcing a bit more cash for some museums and praising there being a pop-up exhibition in Birmingham about Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, are you really giving people the kinds of reasons, the kind of policies and plans that they voted for when they gave you such an enormous majority?
I'm quite horrified by what you've just said, because actually I think that arts and culture belongs to all of us, and the chance to live a richer, larger life and for young people to have opportunities. And over the last 15 years, the opportunity to do that has belonged only to young people whose parents could afford to pay, depending on where they lived in the country. I think that's an absolute disgrace. I come from a town that gave the world Ian McKellen and the Verve. I can't think of where the route would be for that now. And we make no apology for saying that not only are we trying to cut the cost of living, make life easier for people, raise the minimum wage, cut money off people's energy bills, but we're also restoring the opportunities to people that they deserve, that have been denied for them for too long. What is the answer to reform? That is the answer. Will it happen overnight? No, it won't. But I do think what has happened this week is that essentially reform have shown what they really are. They've been lying to people for a long time, and now we can see who they really are. Bringing in Robert Jenrick, who presided over soaring NHS waiting lists and the collapse of the criminal justice system in this country to solve the problems this country faces, is like calling out the arsonists to put out their own fire. It's absolutely absurd, and it's offensive to the intellect of the British people.
I'm not suggesting, and no one would suggest, that culture is not an incredibly important part of this country. But when you look at the polling continually, month after month after month, what you've been putting forward to people as a government is not making them feel that Labour really is delivering on what you promised them. And maybe that's because there have been so many changes of heart. Plans ditched, plans changed, and now this weekend, another potential change of heart over the so-called Hillsborough law. Now, I know you care about this deeply. I think you've got constituents who've been part of the campaign whereby public organisations and public bodies would be required to tell the truth to inquiries. And yet this weekend, many of those campaigners feel that you're going to let them down. And some of your MPs might vote against it because the security services might be exempt. Yeah, you're watering it down, aren't you?
No, I just want to be really clear. The security services won't be exempt, but there is a challenge that we've got collectively, and the challenge is to make sure that this applies to the security services without fear or favour, that they can continue to do their jobs. They're often the recipients of confidential information, but that we never ever end up in a situation like we did with the Manchester Arena inquiry, and I have constituents who are affected by that as well, where the security services are able to withhold information and present an inaccurate picture to families and to a public inquiry for a very long time.
But why then are some of your backbenchers so upset about the plans, accusing you of watering it down? We know that you care about this deeply. Keir Starmer took us and our cameras to see him talking to school children in Liverpool about this earlier this year. But many of your backbenchers appear to be lining up to vote against your plans. So what are you going to do? Withdraw the plans for a while so you can work out a compromise?
No, we're going to do what we've done all the way through the process of this really landmark piece of legislation. We're talking to the families, we're talking to the campaigners, and we're going to work with them to resolve it.
So do you think you'll be able to do a deal before tomorrow?
I think we're going to be able to find a way to resolve it. I'm really confident about that because we have already. And the reason that this is difficult is because we're resetting the relationship between people and the state and putting people back in the driving seat. Now, we've been attacked and undermined at every stage, but the people that we've never been attacked and undermined by are the families who've been fighting for justice. We work with them as partners because this bill is for them, and we're going to make sure that we deliver on it.
So you think you can do a deal before tomorrow?
Look, I'm confident that we're going to resolve it. How it plays out tomorrow at the moment is dependent on those conversations that we have. But those conversations are going on right now. Okay. We're listening as we've always listened, and we will find a way to get this right, because in the end, we want the same thing.
One other thing that lots of families across the country are anxious about, email us about, and people who've been following the conversation very closely, is whether or not the government is starting to think that banning social media for under 16s for kids would be a good idea. The prominent online safety campaigner Ian Russell told us here at the BBC yesterday, it's just too blunt. A more nuanced approach is needed. What's your view as the Culture Secretary?
My view is that we're not doing enough as a country to keep children and young people safe. And I think there are two areas where we need to do more. The first is, I do think we need to look at the existing legislation we've got and see whether it goes far enough. There are strong arguments for banning under 16s from social media, but there are also real concerns raised by the NSPCC and others about whether it pushes children to darker, less regulated places on the internet, whether that has to be married with proper education for young people. We're looking at all of that at the moment. The other area, though, where we really do have to do more as a country, and Liz Kendall and I are absolutely crystal clear that we will, is that we already have laws in this country. We passed some of them in the last 18 months. Under 13-year-olds, for example, are supposed to go through age verifications and not be able to access most of these sites, and yet not enough enforcement action is taking place.
So Ofcom needs to take a tougher approach.
So we're working with Ofcom, but we really welcome what they did on Grok this week. We moved very swiftly, they moved very swiftly. We want to see more of that.
Your colleague Wes Streeting has been clear he thinks it's a good idea to ban kids from social media. But by expressing that view and expressing quite a lot of other views, he's wound up quite a few of your colleagues for they see him shooting his mouth off. And there are even reports that some of his fellow ministers think he should be sacked. Should he be sacked for that?
No, I don't think he should be sacked at all, because look at what we've done this week. We've been able to announce the biggest fall in waiting times on the National Health Service for decades. We're putting record investment in, but it's showing results. And you're right to say that Wes has very strong views about things, and he has a lot of views. I talk to him regularly, and I'm the recipient of many of those views as well. But look, I want to be part of a cabinet where people have their own views, where we're able to challenge one another and we're able to work together in the collective interests of the country. I would just say to all the people creating all of this noise around what this government is doing, nothing will distract us from getting on with changing this country and putting it back in the service of working people.
OK, Lisa, Nandy, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Always good to have you with us in the studio. As one Labour source said to me once, Wes is always going to Wes. Remember, we want to know what you think. Email us, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk. On social media, if you're that way inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura Kay, and you can send us a WhatsApp these days, 08000 282 161. And if you haven't done so far, what are you waiting for? Sign up for our newsletter that pops miraculously into your inbox every Thursday. Well, we were talking to reform. We were talking to Lisa Nandy about reform, forgive me. And it is a year now since the first national opinion poll put them ahead in the polls. Since April, they've consistently been ahead of Labour, and frankly, they've been terrifying their opponents. Reform's success this year has been remarkable. Nigel Farage has had plenty of reasons to get the fireworks out. And on Thursday, of course, it unveiled its latest recruit, Robert Jenrick. There he is, pushed before he jumped, but a big recruit nonetheless. RIchard Tice, the deputy leader of the party, is with us this morning. Let's start on Greenland, because you have agreed with the other parties saying the US is wrong to take this approach on Greenland. What do you think Donald Trump is playing at in the last 24 hours with these threats to the UK?
Yeah, look, the president is completely wrong. I think we're all utterly united, both here in the UK political scene, but also actually across all of the other NATO allies. I think what the president is most concerned about is the risk of particularly China, but also Russia, gaining an extra presence in and around Greenland, in the same way that he's concerned about the risk of China in Venezuela. And I think that's what's primarily on his mind. He's correct on that, but the approach in terms of the way that you work with your closest allies, all of your NATO allies, is clearly completely wrong.
Is it bullying? Is it blackmail? Some reporting suggests this morning.
We are close allies, and the point about friendship is that you tell someone when they've got things right, but you also tell them very clearly when they've got it wrong. And on this, the president has got it wrong. And the objective of protecting Greenland for all NATO allies is correct. the way that he's going about it is totally wrong.
What should then the UK do in response to this? So Nigel Farage, we understand, is going to Davos. President Trump is going to Davos. Will he see him there? What would he say to him if he sees him?
Let's hope they have an opportunity to have some words. Both will have very busy schedules for sure. But in a sense, that's where real friendship can come in to say, look, we understand what you're trying to achieve. This is the wrong way to go about it. There's different ways to go about it. But this point about the objective is also really clear because China is a national security threat. And what we shouldn't be doing, for example, you talk about tariffs and trade. We shouldn't be buying 7,000 tonnes of Chinese steel for a new UK power plant. We shouldn't be allowing ourselves to be flooded with cheap Chinese subsidised electric vehicles. That is not good for Britain PLC.
But the point here is that what the government should do about it, you aspire to be in government, what ought the government be saying to Donald Trump? Not just saying, oh, we think you've got it a bit wrong. What would you do?
Publicly, you say you've got it wrong. Privately, you negotiate, and everything is on the table.
What's on the table then?
Whether it's tariffs, whether it's trade, whether it's tech, whether it's the Chagos bill, there's lots of things that could be on the table that everyone's aware of. You don't negotiate in the public eye in front of the world's press. We know that doesn't work very well. But behind the scenes, the president needs to understand this is the wrong way to go about it. There is a much better way to achieve the objective, which is to protect all of us from a malign Chinese influence.
Your boss, Nigel Farage, said when Trump won his second term that he would help make the world a safer place. Is he making the world a safer place when he's threatening the UK and its allies online, accusing them of playing a dangerous game?
But it's work in progress. In the Middle East, yes, great progress has been made thanks to the President of the United States. Ukraine is work in progress. Really difficult, but we're all united. We want to get a ceasefire and peace, but there's got to be the proper security guarantees. With regard to this, look, this is the wrong way to go about protecting us all from malign Chinese influence in and around Greenland.
But this is about a threat to NATO.
Correct.
Allies.
Absolutely.
He is threatening NATO allies.
That's why we're all united that it's completely the wrong approach. And he will be hearing from many people, whether it's the Prime Minister, whether it's other NATO allies, whether it's Emmanuel Macron, and indeed from Nigel in the Davos summit this week.
But do you think that Donald Trump is undermining NATO by doing this?
Look, it's the wrong way to go about it. NATO is our strong, very successful defensive alliance. Since it was created, it's been remarkable, and we should all make sure that we're all contributing to that. Regrettably, in a more dangerous world, we have to contribute more to defence and make sure that we're buying the right kit, the right number of troops. Serious question marks about why Labour is slow on the defence investment plan.
It doesn't look like it's working very well when the American president is threatening
well, no, actually, the opposite
allies
is true.
within it.
Everybody has committed to spend more on defence. So in that sense, actually, it is strengthening NATO. That is the right thing to do. In terms of the language used, that's the wrong way to go about it.
As part of this shifting balance and all this pressure on NATO at the moment, Reform said you wouldn't support British troops going in to protect a potential peace in Ukraine if it was only Britain and France, the coalition of the willing.
Yeah, well, the danger is it's a coalition of the unwilling. If there's only 2 out of 39 saying they want to put boots on the ground. Interesting, but the question is, look, we've got to get the right security guarantees. The question is genuinely, how long can any NATO ally put boots on the ground? Have we spent enough to ensure that we've got enough boots, the right kit? That's point number one. The other question is actually, does Ukraine really, given how successfully they are defending themselves, is it boots they want or is it more kit, the best kit, plenty of it? Those are genuine questions that need to be resolved.
But President Zelensky's been very clear that the coalition of the willing to provide security, whether it's some form of buffer zone, that is part of what they require.
That's all...
So what would it take for you to back the idea of troops under whatever umbrella
You've got to make
going
sure
to Ukraine to help protect
the whole point about a solution,
peace?
it is that it is sustainable and durable. And obviously the US has a big part to play in that. But, you know, we need to make sure that from UK's point of view, anything we put forward, it has to be sustainable, has to be in our interest, but also doesn't in any way prejudice or put anything else at risk. Those are the important judgments.
The Defence Secretary, John Healey, says your resistance to committing to providing peacekeeping troops in Ukraine says you can't be trusted with our security.
Well, a Defence Secretary that has continually promised a defence investment plan for almost a year now, but still hasn't produced it, I would suggest that actually he's the one that is failing to give everybody confidence that we're going to provide the investment, the time to do so. I would just remind people, we were the only party in the general election that said we need to get to 2.5% of GDP within 3 years and 3% within 6. So I'm not going to take any lessons from any other party about the strength of our resolve to defend and protect the United Kingdom.
Do you trust your new recruit, Robert Jenrick?
Robert is a great new asset to reform. And yes, I do trust. He believes in the principles, the values that we believe in, and he'll be a great addition. He brings what people have said we haven't got, which is ministerial experience. And of course, there's a lot of political intrigue and banter. We all understand that. Politics is a challenging, rough old game. But in terms of what it shows people, and we've had a great reaction to it, is that actually reform is the opposition to the Labour Party. We're leading in some 200 national polls. And in a sense, it's interesting though, Labour now are third in almost all of the national polls, disappearing down a plug hole.
Would you be happy to see him as a reform shadow chancellor, Nigel Farage's chancellor?
Look, Nigel's
one day,
the boss. We will. The great thing is we've got a multitude of talent across a whole range of the main offices of state.
Would you be happy to see him take on that role?
We've got a great range of talent. The boss will make his decision about different roles at the appropriate time. At the moment, we're focused on campaigning and winning in the May elections. They're like the midterms. They're a massive, massive round of elections, where we're allowed to have them, by the way. 4 million people having their elections cancelled, utterly disgraceful.
Isn't it interesting that when we spoke to Robert Jenrick on Friday and we asked him about your plan to lift the two-child benefit cap on British families if both parents are in work, he didn't sound that convinced by that policy. He said, the party has to think that through. But isn't it irresponsible, your critics on the right might say, to send a message that says to families, you can have as many children as you like and the state will continue to give you extra cash?
What's absolutely responsible is to say the key thing is we need people to work. And our child benefit policy is around working families, British families. That's the responsible thing to do, to celebrate the importance of work, going to work, contributing to your community, giving a fine example to your children. And if you do that, you make your family better off, you make your community better off, and you make the country better off.
Labour...
And everybody has to focus on that and celebrate that. And that's why our policy is actually targeted at British working parents.
But Labour says you're discriminating against the children of parents who weren't born here. Even if the children were born here, their parents weren't. Why should they lose out?
Well, that's the whole point about politics. You put different views forward. I would suggest that people understand we stand on the side of those what we call alarm clock Britain. Labour stand on the side of welfare Britain, ever more welfare, and they are disincentivising work. We're going to incentivise work, incentivise entrepreneurship, because that's what makes people more prosperous and our country more prosperous.
Interesting. I think the phrase alarm clock Britain was first coined by one Nick Clegg, the leader of the Liberal Democrats some time ago, and thought he'd have much in common with Reform UK. I just wonder if we can try our luck. You trailed the defection from the Labour Party this week. People with eagle eyes might have noticed the former Labour MP Kate Hoey being very nice about Nigel Farage online last night. Is she on her way to you?
Kate's a wonderful person. She's been a good friend of mine personally for many, many years.
So she's coming to join you?
Well, no, let's patience is a virtue, Laura.
RIchard Tice, thank you very much indeed for coming and talking to us this morning and stepping into the breach when Nigel Farage was under the weather. And we will have the next of our 2026 New Year Leader interview box set. It's Sir Ed Davey, who will be joining us next week. So stick that in your diary. Let's then talk to our trio at the desk who were listening patiently during all of that. Tracy, when you heard Lisa Nandy responding to the government, for the government, about how they're going to deal with Donald Trump, I mean, essentially they're just saying, well, we'll have to talk to them, but that's kind of it. I mean, is it credible?
Well, it is credible because I do believe that we are in a position where we can have strong, robust negotiations with other EU leaders. But actually, that interview that we've just seen, I mean, I listened really carefully, Laura, and not one point did RIchard Tice mention the Russians. It was all the Chinese, and maybe that's that's not a surprise when the leader of Reform UK in Wales is now serving a prison sentence because he was bribed by the Russians. So that just really illuminates the fact that what a situation we'd be in if it was actually Nigel Farage or even Zach Polanski doing these negotiations. We have somebody there at the table that has great respect from Europe and also has navigated difficult terrain with a very tricky president of the United States. And I absolutely believe what Lisa is saying, that there are robust conversations happening and that we will get to a decent situation that works for us all. But certainly when you've got that unequivocal we're going to buy Greenland, it's a very difficult negotiation to be starting from if that's the premise.
I mean, Jeremy, do you think the government has miscalculated their relationship with Donald Trump?
No, I think that in a situation like this, you have to be careful with your words because
He doesn't seem to be.
No, he certainly isn't. But as I say, I don't think in the end Donald Trump wants the destruction of NATO, and that's why I don't think he actually will invade Greenland. But he wants us to think that he might, so that he can create the conditions where everyone feels forced, intimidated into doing a deal to sell Greenland. We have to be absolutely steady, but we also have to make sure we don't use rhetoric that makes it difficult for him to climb down. He does climb down. He climbed down when it came to tariffs against China. He climbed down when it came to tariffs against Brazil. So he does change his mind, and that's what we need to happen here. But you do need to be steady in what you say, but also show resolve. And that's why we need to be spending more on defence. Actually, that was something that I agree with RIchard Tice on.
It's some high wire act, though, isn't it, Kay?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very clever salesman, isn't he? And he does Donald Trump better than anybody else ever could. He's a clever salesman. He believes what he says. That's what he said when I interviewed him. I don't think he always believes what he says, but he goes out punching, and everyone thinks, oh, like this morning, that's all we're talking about. But do I think that he will invade Greenland? I'm at my master's knee when it comes to the former Foreign Secretary being
You
here.
didn't say that when you interviewed me, Kay.
I was going to say, times have changed.
What has freedom done to you?
He's not going to invade Greenland, but he wants to make us think as though he's going to, and he's threatening us with tariffs. But interesting that RIchard Tice used exactly the same words that the Prime Minister used when he said that he is completely wrong this time. I think when it comes to our Prime Minister, he speaks softly. Is he carrying a big stick? I think he probably is. I think he has the backing of the rest of Europe as well. We've doubled our Marines, is what we were hearing from Lisa Nandy. I think that's from 2 to 4. Not a lot of people have gone to Greenland at this early stage, but the bases are there. 50,000 troops were there during the Cold War. They can increase those bases again if they need to. He's got all sorts of options, but he's sitting on his throne this morning, reading what the world is saying about him. He will back down, I'm sure of it.
But Tracy, is there anything that the government can actually practically do other than try to lift the phone? I mean, Lisa Nandy said, there hasn't been a call, as far as she knows, so far between Number 10 and the White House. The Prime Minister may or may not see Donald Trump at Davos. Nigel Farage sounds pretty hopeful of seeing him at Davos.
If he gets better in time.
If he gets better in time. Was there anything that what could the government do?
Yeah, I think with these situations, it's not just the individual, it's the people who they listen to as well. And what is troubling is even John Bolton said this is probably the worst moment of
former security
Indeed.
advisor.
So it's identifying where people around Keir would also have relationships as well, because we can't get away from the fact that this doesn't just harm businesses in West Yorkshire and this country. It also harms businesses in the US. So if you're looking at the midterms in November, there will be people around Donald Trump saying, actually, this is catastrophic for us as well, if we lose grip of this situation.
And Jeremy, with your hat on as a former Chancellor, could you just spell out for us, if we get into a situation where there were this level of tariffs, what would it actually mean for British businesses? Just at a moment when the economy's had a really hard time, but the latest figures showed actually some growth.
Well, it's damaging for our pharmaceutical sector and our car manufacturers and our machine manufacturers in particular. They're the 3 biggest sectors. But it's also, as Lisa Nandy said, very damaging for the United States, because what it says is that America is an unstable market. It's not a market that you can really count on. Just one thing in terms of what the government can actually do when it comes to Greenland. I mean, I think we have to be honest, uncomfortable though it is, that this is damaging to NATO. And one of the things we can do is make sure that Putin does not take the wrong conclusions. He needs to know that our resolve to defend Ukraine is as strong as ever. And that's why I am concerned that we are not making more progress in putting on the table a proper plan to defend Ukraine. And I think that that is something, we obviously looking across the Atlantic to Washington, we need to be thinking about what's happening in Moscow as well.
Let's then talk about politics at home and the Robert Jenrick defection. Jeremy, you're a very senior voice in the Conservative Party for a long time. What do you think he was up to? Political opportunity?
Well, there's always a bit of that. All politicians have that combination of altruism and egotism. And
you don't say.
We should never pretend differently. But I think the big picture here, just stepping back from the psychodrama, when you're in opposition, we have an absolute responsibility to give the country a credible alternative to a failing government that is destroying jobs, wrecking growth, making mistakes on all sorts of levels. And what Robert Jenrick did was the opposite. He stood behind a podium this week and he didn't train his guns on Keir Starmer. He trained them on Conservative colleagues who have worked loyally with him for over a decade. And the problem with that approach is very dangerous, because what it could mean is, come the next election, the vote on the right is split. The vote on the left, because they're very good at tactical voting, unites. And we end up with another 5 years of a totally failing government. And that's why it was so irresponsible and so dangerous.
You sound really angry.
Well, I do think that the Conservative Party gave Robert Jenrick his career, and he has a responsibility to Conservative values. And, I think, there is a really big risk. The upside, I think, is, and, this is not something that we were expecting to be able to say, because we didn't know this was going to happen this week, is that we have with Kemi Badenoch a very decisive leader who is able to deal with adversity in a way that actually strengthens her leadership. And I think people have seen and have been seeing for the last few months a different side to Kemi. I think she did a very good interview with you last week. And that, I think, is one of the things you can do when you're an opposition leader. You don't have control of any of the levers of power, but people can see how you deal with your own party.
Kay, it looks a mess, though, doesn't it?
Who would have thought that the voice of reason this week would be Boris Johnson? He wrote in the... I know, stay with me. He said that defections only matter to those that they impact and political nodes. Nobody else cares. People watching this morning don't care that he's gone to reform. Let's see what happens. Kemi Badenoch had a good start to this latest crisis when she said, he is not my problem anymore, he's Nigel's problem now. But she said it 6 times in one interview. It's a little bit like saying to your ex, I'm glad you're gone. Leave it now, Kemi, just leave it. I think Starmer's handled it very well. He's not got involved. He's not got down and dirty with it at all.
I mean, Tracy, is it a gift for Labour, actually, if Reform and the Tories just end up scrapping with each other and fight to the death, and you guys can crack on? Because there's a huge risk to Labour from reform too. But actually, if this turns into a sort of, fight to the death, a wrestle between Reform and Tories, it's a gift for you, isn't it?
Well, yes, absolutely. And certainly Reform is now turning into, no disrespect, but a sort of care home for clapped-out Tories, because it seems like the people who can't get on in the Conservative Party, or they see that potentially they're not going to be a leader anymore, that they are going to jump ship. And can I just be clear, though? I think Reform are a danger to the North. Because we saw last week, Rachel Reeves came to Leeds, announced £45 billion of investment in Northern Powerhouse Rail, something we've campaigned for over a decade, 60 promises for the Conservative Party, and not a spade in the ground. And what did Reform say? Reform said any business that takes a contract to build Northern Powerhouse Rail, they better be careful, because when Reform are in power, they're going to scrap Northern Powerhouse Rail. And you see this across the country, that in councils, local authorities, it's all performance, it's performative politics. They pretend that they can find savings. You have councils with a £73 million black hole. Another council spent £75,000 on flags when they can't even function with adult social care and social services. These are not credible people. They are a danger to growth and a danger to the North.
Well, they would, of course, deny that, but certainly it's interesting that many people's fire in the Tories and the Labour Party is increasingly being directed towards Reform. Thank you, all three of you, for now, because we're going to concentrate again on the United States, as Donald Trump's pronouncements have caused such jitters for allies. That threat to slap extra taxes on British and European businesses after they tried to show support for Greenland, the territory that Donald Trump so seems to desire. Is he really serious, or, as we've been discussing, is he just trying to rattle everyone's cage? Before he threatened the tariffs on Friday, I went to speak to the US Speaker, Mike Johnson, the leader of the Republican Party in the US Congress. Mr. Speaker, only the president and the vice president are more powerful than you in the United States. And I know while you're here, you want to talk about our shared goals as countries and the West's moral goals. But right now, our countries are divided on some crucial issues. Your president has made it clear that the US must get hold of Greenland. To many of our politicians, that would be an absolute violation of the things that our two countries believe in. It's not your land.
Well, it's not our land, but Greenland has strategic importance to us because of its geography, its placement, but not just to the U.S., but to all freedom-loving people everywhere. We live in a dangerous time and a dangerous world, and the president's recognition of that is not something new. In fact, it goes all the way back to President Truman in our country, who was first talking about the strategic importance of that. So we'll see how it develops.
It's one thing to say it's an important part of the world. This country believes that too. It's quite another to threaten military action. What the president says he'll take it the easy way or the hard way. I mean, you admit it's not your land, and you yourself said military action would not be appropriate. So why is that on the table?
Well, I don't foresee military intervention in Greenland. It's a small population of people, and I think diplomatic channels is the way to go. And I think the president's appointment of an envoy, recognizes that.
So should we not pay attention to the president's threat to use military action?
No, we should pay attention to his words, but I think people are heeding that. I've noted that the UK and some of our native allies have people there now. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that all of our friends and allies around the world have recognized anew the importance of that geography and that placement, and hopefully we can all work on that together.
So was that the plan all along?
I don't know. The president is playing chess, as we say, so we'll see. I don't know. I haven't discussed that specific issue with him. I do talk with him frequently, sometimes multiple times every day. But we have a lot going on right now, so that's just one small piece to a larger puzzle.
It's a big piece, though, in a big and complex puzzle around the world. Many people in this country look at how President Trump conducts diplomacy, also how he conducts himself at home. The president said the only limits on his power are my own morality. Have you got another king 250 years after getting rid of the last one?
No, we don't have a king. We have a strong commander-in-chief, and America needed that. And frankly, freedom-loving people around the world needed that. A strong America is good for everybody around the globe, and most people recognize that and state it as an objective fact. He's exerting peace through strength again. He uses bravado sometimes to do it. That's his personality. But you know what? The American people voted for a strong personality.
What's he willing to do in Iran? He has promised protesters in the street that help is on the way. As they have been gathering in the streets, risking their own lives, many people have been killed by the regime. Is America willing to take military action against the Iranian regime to bring it to an end?
We certainly hope that it doesn't come to that, and I think what he's doing right now is a strong show of moral support. I think President Trump's speaking out has encouraged and fueled the fire, so to speak, for freedom, and I think that's a good development.
And yet many people are dead who have been out protesting on the streets.
It's
the
terrible.
Iranians would have it that actually what has happened is this protest has been put down and many people have been killed. So I ask again, what's President Trump really willing to do beyond offering what you describe as moral support?
Well, you would have to ask him that.
What's your view? You're third most powerful politician in the United States.
Yes, I'm in charge of the House of Representatives and the Congress, and it is the role of Congress under our constitutional system to declare war. I don't think we're anywhere close to that or in any necessity of that. We do want to encourage the flourishing of freedom, and I think this is a very welcome development. I think freedom-loving people around the world recognize that, and they're applauding it and praying for the Iranians that they can continue this, and that as he said, the indiscriminate killing of innocent citizens and protesters is detestable. It must be stopped, and everyone, I think all prime ministers, presidents, leaders around the world should call it out.
Congress represents the American people. There are even Republican senators now who are uncomfortable with the number of executive orders, directions coming straight from the Oval Office, from President Trump, behind the grand desk, rather than going through your Congress. Are you comfortable with how much he is wielding power as an individual leader rather than consulting with your party or putting things through the democratic normal means?
Well, I would challenge the premise of the question. He does consult with Congress. The president and I consult together all the time, daily. He talks with Leader Thune, the Republican leader in the Senate, as well. Our colleagues are conferring with him constantly. And this is the most engaged and involved president with Congress probably in the history of the country. I mean, if you go back...
Really? When even
yes.
some Republican senators are concerned about the balance between the Oval Office and Congress?
Well, there's a constant friction. Our system is set up so that we have the balance of powers. And it doesn't mean in any way that we are yielding any of our authority as the legislative branch. It means that we are trying to unify the government and work in an efficient and effective manner for the people. And I will say, the record that we have produced is one that we are quite proud to run on for our upcoming midterm election. The first year of the second term of President Trump has been remarkable. America's back, and we see that as a great development.
What some people in America and in other parts of the world, though, have been alarmed by seeing is some of the events on America's streets. I know you want to stand up this week as part of your visit for defending what you say is America's moral values. In what way is shooting an unarmed civilian in the streets in Minneapolis standing up for moral values?
Well, if you see the tape and you look into the details of that, that unarmed civilian weaponized a motor vehicle and tried to run over an officer who serves in the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency of the country. And he made a split-second decision, and it looks to me, while we await the final details of the investigation, it looks to me to have been an act of self-defense. He was defending himself.
But, Mr. Speaker, we've all seen that tape. When it comes to an unarmed civilian, was it really the appropriate moral response for her to be shot almost at point blank?
It's easy for journalists and politicians to make moral judgments about this. Law enforcement officers are on the front line. They make split decisions. When a car is coming at an officer, they make a snap judgment. But I think what we saw there was a very tragic situation brought about by someone who was impeding the rule of law and law enforcement officers in doing their job.
Many people in the UK, many politicians and many members of the public wonder if America in 2026 is an America they recognize. You describe President Trump's approach several times as peace through strength. After what's happened in Venezuela, President Trump has said he would put Marco Rubio in charge of Cuba. Would you rule out America striking other countries in the way that they did Venezuela and removing the leader?
Well, first of all, we didn't strike the country of Venezuela. We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not
There were
occupying
military strikes
Venezuela.
in the capital, Caracas, to remove the leader.
We removed the leader because he was an indicted criminal in U.S. federal court multiple times. There was a superseding indictment as recently as the fall of last year because Maduro is a criminal, a narco-terrorist. His actions are responsible for the deaths of thousands, many thousands, tens of thousands of Americans with his drug trade and all the nefarious activity he was involved in. And he was, through our system of due process, he was indicted not by the Trump administration, but many years earlier by another administration.
But would you rule out taking similar action against other countries where there's evidence that America and other countries around the world can see of leaders behaving badly in ways that Donald Trump doesn't like? Would you rule out that happening in other countries?
If our legal system properly adjudicates with all of our constitutional due process concerns and everything else and properly indicts someone by a grand jury, then under our law, the Department of Justice can request the military to assist in apprehending that person. That is not an invasion of another country. It is not regime change. It is bringing a hardened, dangerous criminal who has murdered Americans to justice, and we would support that. I don't foresee another scenario like that.
There's around 1,000 days left till the next US presidential campaign. You have a wide base of political support, not just among the MAGA movement. Would you run in 2028?
I have enough trouble of my own every day to think about the future. I really don't. I'm trying to be an effective Speaker of the House in very polarized times, not just in the U.S., but around the world, trying to be a steady hand at the wheel and to serve faithfully. It's a matter of faith to me to do that. I mean, it's a biblical admonition to not be concerned about tomorrow, because today has enough trouble of its own, as Scripture says, and I take that to heart. So I'm just trying to be faithful in the little thing that is put before me every day, and I don't really have any further aspiration. I just want to do this job well.
Many people believe you could have an even bigger political future, or I don't know, would you be happy to serve with J.D. Vance as a number 2?
Look, I don't even think about that. I'm probably one of the few people in Washington that doesn't have aspiration for higher office. For that matter, I didn't aspire to this office, never expected to have it. I'm just trying to do my duty.
And just lastly, you're here as part of the commemoration of, the United States and the United Kingdom's historical separation. I just wonder, there are people in this country who worry about the state of America right now, and they do look to Donald Trump as somebody who is trying to lead his country in a very different way that many people in here find challenging. What would you say to them?
I would say to our friends in the UK to keep faith in America as we keep faith in you. This is a special relationship, as is often said. We should stand strong together. There are periods and epochs in our history with different leaders and different styles and all of that. At the end of the day, though, I think our foundational truths are the same, and our friendship is important. And I think as long as America and the UK stand together, it's good for everyone around the globe.
And what about Nigel Farage as Prime Minister one day?
It's a fascinating concept. He makes some good arguments. And I think the UK is going through a period of political change and sort of a recalibration, as America has done over the years at different times. In some sense, we're sort of doing that right now. And so I think at the end of the day, though, we trust the American people. I think you could trust the people of the UK to make the right decisions and to evaluate these things for themselves, and ultimately to choose the right course. And I hope that we will.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Recalibrating. Well, you can watch the full interview with Mike Johnson is on the iPlayer for you now. As we come to a close, let's look ahead to a big moment in Parliament tomorrow. Tracy, we talked to Lisa Nandy about the so-called Hillsborough Law. It's meant to mean that public bodies and public servants have to, by law, tell the truth when something goes wrong. Your fellow mayors of Manchester and Liverpool are really worried that campaigners are being let down here because the intelligence services might be exempt in some way. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the duty of candour is so vital for the justice for these families that have been fighting for decades. We wouldn't be here with another government, with a Conservative government reform. It is only because of Labour values that we've got to this point. And my understanding is that we're 95% there. But I do agree with Andy and Steve, and also Ian Byrne, that without the trust and confidence of the families, it's going to be very difficult. And I was listening really carefully to Lisa, and she was saying that obviously negotiations are ongoing and that there is hope that they can get to a situation where, notwithstanding national security, it's vital that the security services, or, MI5, MI6, that whether you're talking about Hillsborough, whether you're talking about the arena, whether you're talking about nuclear test veterans, it is vital that they are subject to the duty of candour. You can do it privately with a judge. There are ways to do it.
But what's the answer? I mean, delay it, press pause on what's.
I'm not in Parliament anymore, but I would say that this government has shown an appetite to slow things down, to get things right. And I think this is a historic, landmark piece of legislation. It's really worth leaning in to get it right.
But, Kay, the risk for the government politically, and of course the principles are more important here, but the politics are important too. And it looks like this might be another occasion where Labour backbenchers are pushing the government around.
Yeah, although she wasn't having any of it, Lisa Nandy, was she? She said that she was confident, and you pressed her, and a couple of times she said that she was confident that they would get it over the line. There might be some tinkering around the edges, but I don't think this is one of those many U-turns that we've seen, from a Labour government. I think that she will be able to get it across, especially with people like Andy Burnham and Steve over in Merseyside as well.
But was it naive, Jeremy Hunt, in the first place to imagine that even on the most sensitive and important issues, you can see the family's passion for this? But is it naive to imagine that the security services, with all the work they do, could ever be compelled to tell everybody everything about what they do?
I'm afraid this is just another example where the government has not thought things through. There has to be a way to safeguard national security, which we all know really does matter, whilst making sure that the security services can't do a big cover-up when they've made a mistake. And when I was Foreign Secretary, we used to approve what MI6 did with a complicated system where the Foreign Secretary and an independent judge looks at everything that's being done all around the world. There's got to be a similar way of making sure that families can be sure there isn't a cover-up.
So you think there could be a sensible compromise?
They just need to change these amendments which don't do that job and find a better way of reassuring families who, let's face it, really do understand what it's like to be the victim of a cover-up.
Well, we know that this means a lot to families who've been involved in all sorts of things that have gone wrong over the years. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Parliament tomorrow.
Zahawi as well this morning, who must be fuming. He thought that it was going all his way when he defected to Reform earlier on the week. And then Jenrick comes along and lands this tanks on his lawn.
Such drama. I'm not sure how happy Richard Tice really was about the prospect of Robert Jenrick becoming the shadow reform Chancellor on behalf of Nigel Farage. All three of you, thank you so much for your company and your insights this morning. Thank you to all of our guests today. And of course, thank you most of all to you for spending your Sunday morning with us. Next week, Sir Ed Davey will join us for the next in our box set of leaders' interviews at the beginning of the year. If you missed the full interview with Robert Jenrick on Friday, that's on iPlayer and is worth a listen, and on BBC Sounds too. And Weekend Newscast is there for you as well, with me and Paddy O'Connell. And as ever, I'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Same time, same place.